Hello, this is Justin at the Tech Train again here. Welcome to lesson 16 in the Learn to Program in Small Basic tutorial series. Now, last week in lesson 15, we looked at developing a very simple painting app in Small Basic. This is it here. So we have a graphics window and we can click and hold down the left mouse button to draw on this graphics window. Now, we've chosen programmatically, so within the code itself, we've chosen the color, in this case red, and we've chosen the line thickness as well. That's fine, but it's fairly limited. And what we want to be able to do is to allow the user to choose the color. And not just to have one color, but to be able to draw part of the drawing and then perhaps click and select from a paint palette a different color. And have multiple colors and also multiple line thicknesses, and also perhaps a reset or clear button for a new drawing. So in today's tutorial, that's what we're going to be looking at, those three things. Now, if you haven't got to this point yet, if you haven't done this, it's probably going to be a good idea if you stop now, go back to lesson 15 in this tutorial series. There's a link probably popping up at the top right corner of this video right now, which will allow you to jump back and go and have a look at that video first of all, just so you have this code, but also you understand more about what's going on, because we are using mouse manipulation here. We're taking data from the mouse. We're also using our own custom subroutines, and we're calling those subroutines, and we're using a variety of variables. So if you've not looked at lesson 15, head back, have a look at that now, so all this makes more sense, and we'll be right here when you're ready. But if you did do last week's, and hopefully you played around with this, I suggested that you change things like the background color, pen width, the color of the pen, and so forth. But you're still going to be in the situation where at the moment you've got one color. So how do we change that? Well, what I want to do to begin with is to draw a color palette, and I'm going to use the left hand part of the graphics window for this. I'm going to have it about 100 pixels or 100 steps wide, and I'm going to have just simple rectangles or squares with different colors on. So let's do that right to begin with. So what we've got at the moment, remember this line at the top you can ignore completely. I've just got several monitors set up here, so this line here just simply makes sure that when I run the program, the graphics window appears in the middle of the screen you're looking at. So that you can ignore. Here we will change all this at some point, but for the moment we can leave that as it is. And these two lines here, of course, are telling the computer what code to jump and carry out if the mouse is clicked or if the mouse moves. So between setting up the graphics window and telling the computer what to do if the mouse does something, we need to draw the color palette. So let's make a little bit of room just in here. By the way, should have pointed out probably, it doesn't matter if you have blank lines in your code. In fact, blank lines are good. Just as in books, in stories, in writing, in articles, you tend to divide text or writing up into paragraphs and even chapters, and that makes it clearer and easier to read. So with code as well, you can divide and split it up, separate it with lines, so it makes it a bit easier to see your code. So I'll just give a little bit of space in the middle here, and that's fine. So what I'm going to do to begin with is type graphics window dot, and I want to draw a rectangle, not the outline, so I want it to be a filled rectangle. So we'll have a fill rectangle. Now we've done this of course previously, but for the moment what we're going to do inside the parentheses, inside the brackets, is we're going to put the X and Y coordinate of the top left of this rectangle and then the width and height. Well, this is going to be the first color block, which is going to be the top left corner. So the coordinates are going to be 0 and 0. So it's right up in the top left corner. And for the width and height, we want these to be squares. So I'm going to have 100 by 100. Now, what color is this going to be? we haven't specified yet. So each time we draw one of these colors, we'll need to say what color it is. Now remember, you can have a whole variety of colors. And if you go to Google and you search for small basic colors, click on the first link you get to, and that will show you a list of 50, 60, 70 different colors that you can use. I'm going to keep with basics for the moment, keep it simple. What I'm going to do is have red as the first one, so graphics window, and for the fill rectangle, it's the brush that we're using, so brush color equals, and I'll just put in red for this one. So now when we run this, you'll see that we're going to get a red square in the top left corner here. Now this doesn't do anything at the moment, obviously we've still got red anyway, so that hasn't changed anything, and in fact we can draw right over that as well, not that it'll show. But what we want to do now is to have a blue rectangle or blue square underneath this, so let's do that. Now the first thing we're going to have to do, of course, is change the brush color, so let's just do that. And you can use any colors you want, of course. I'm just going to put blue down here. And now we need to think about where this rectangle is going to go. I'll copy and paste that line for the moment, but let's think about the coordinates first of all. So if the red rectangle, the red square, first of all, is at 0, 0, the first 0 is the X. So left or right, it needs to be 0 because it's right up against the left hand side. So the blue one is also going to be 0 because that is also going to be right up against the left hand side. The second 0 here though for red is what is the top coordinate, the Y coordinate. Now remember, that starts at 0 at the top and gets larger as you go down. So if this is 100 pixels high, the blue one needs to be 100 pixels lower than the red one. So this Y coordinate here will need to be 100. The width and the height can be the same. We'll keep those as 100 and 100. So if I run this now, you'll see we get our red rectangle at the top, and then we've got our blue rectangle underneath. Let's do another one. I'll do yellow. So I'm going to change the brush color to yellow, and then we'll copy and paste this. And again, it's going to be a case of only changing the Y position. Each time we add another block, it's going to be another 100 pixels further down. So this is going to be 200. And if I run that, you'll see we've now got those 3 colors. Now I'm only using a fairly small graphics window here. You could have your graphics window whatever size you want. You can still maximize this even if you do have it set to a specific size. And if you decide that these are a little bit too big and you want to make them smaller, just maybe 50 points perhaps, that's absolutely fine. If you are going to change the size of these, then of course the Y coordinate of the top left corner of each one will need to be slightly different. So just bear that in mind. So what I'm going to do is let you just have a little look at that first of all. So as I do in these videos, I tend to give you pause points so that you can actually go away, try that straight away. And the best way of doing this as ever is to try to do it without looking at my code first of all. So you've seen my code, you understand the basic idea. So go have a look, see if you can do it yourself. If you make mistakes, don't panic. That's normal, that's fine. Have a look at the error messages which will occur at the bottom. So if I was to, let's say, take a number out of there, run my code, I've got an error message down at the bottom here. So don't just ignore it, have a look at it, see what it says. It's telling me line 12, it thinks character 16. That can be fairly accurate, but the first number here is the line number. So it tells me line 12 has an error. And the graphics window.fill range is given 3 arguments, 3 bits of information. There it is, 1, 2, 3, but it needs 4. So we're missing 1 bit of information. So then we can pop that back in there, run our code, and the error message goes. So if you do get an error, don't just ignore it, don't panic, have a look at it, see if that helps you to work out where the error is and what it might be, and fix it if you can. And if you need to come back and have a look at my code, then that's fine. So I'll give you a quick pause, and then we'll pick up and show you how to start making these squares interactive. Okay, so hopefully you managed to create your own colour palette, and it would be nice if you did a lot more colours than I did. So I've only got 3. You could have 10, 12, 20 different colours if you want to. You can have as many as you want to. So what do we do about these now? Well, we need to have a look at this subroutine here, the mouse clicked subroutine. Now remember, this is just simply the name of a subroutine we came up with. So mouse clicked is not a small basic command. We could call this anything we like. Mousey, mousey, clicky, clicky. I mean, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's simply the name we've given to a block of code, which we call a subroutine, that happens when the user presses the mouse down, when a button on the mouse. So at the moment, all that happens is when we press the mouse, we take a note of where the last position was for the mouse and update it to where the mouse is now, so the mouse's own X and Y coordinates. And then of course the mouse moved means we draw a line between those last coordinates and where we are now. However, we need to do something else. So yes, we might be drawing, but not if the user has pressed the mouse down in one of these areas here. Effectively, we need to know, first of all, whether the user has pressed the mouse down anywhere where the X coordinate is less than 100. So remember, each of these boxes is 100 pixels wide. So this edge here is at the 100 pixel mark. And if we click anywhere to the left of that 100 pixel mark, there's a good chance we've clicked on one of these color palettes, and so we'll need to change the brush color. So that's the first thing we need to do. So in this mouse clicked subroutine, I'm just going to make a little bit of space here first of all, and I'm going to ask a question. I'll get the computer to ask a question. It needs to know whether something is the case or not. So before I write this line of code out, have a think. What do you think is going to be the key word that I'm going to write, which will get the computer to decide whether something is the case, whether to do one bit of code or something else? If you said it was if, congratulations, well done. If is our selection keyword. So this is where we get the computer to decide what code to do. If what? Well, we need to know whether the mouse's X coordinate is less than 100. So to do that, we can say if graphics window dot mouse X, oops, there we are, mouse X, so the coordinates of the mouse on the X axis. If that is less than 100, then what do we do? So that's first of all saying, and I can't run the program now because I have incomplete code, but that's now saying that if the mouse is right to the left hand side in that left 100 pixel area, then what do we do? Well, of course, the first thing we need to do now is to decide what the Y position is of the mouse. If the Y position is up at the top left, so it's less than 100, then we're in the red section. So we need to say here, another selection statement, if the graphics window dot mouse Y coordinate is less than 100, then, and I'll put a comment in here, just using an apostrophe here, we know they've clicked red. Okay, so if the X coordinate of the mouse is less than 100 and the Y coordinate is less than 100, then they've clicked in that top left corner, which we've said is the red area. So what do we do if they have clicked in the red area? Well, all we need to do is change the brush color, the pen color, because we're drawing lines, so the pen color, we're going to change that to red. Now, of course, it was red to begin with up there. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to change that to white. So when we start drawing normally, we're just going to get a white line on a black background, and it will only change to red if I click on the red square. So I've just copied and pasted that line, changed the color back to red. So if the mouse position is less than 100 on the X and on the Y, we know we've clicked the red area, so change the pen color to red. But what else could happen? Well, this whole block here is looking at the X coordinate and saying if we're less than 100 on the X coordinate, it's going to be one of these colors. So we need to have a series of these other selection statements here saying, well, what's the Y position? Is it less than 100? Well, it's red. Else if the graphics window dot mouse Y is less than 200, so if it's still, the X is still less than 100, if it's less than 200, then it's going to be the blue category. So we know here that it's going to be blue. Now, of course, you might say, yes, but the blue section is only 100 by 100. Why have we got 200 in there? Well, the computer carries out these selection statements in order. So it asks this question first of all. We know the X is less than 100, so we know we're on the left-hand side. So is the Y less than 100? If it is, it's going to carry out this line and then finish. It's not going to look at any of these other else-if statements. It's going to finish that. But if the answer is no, then the computer looks at the next else-if statement. So if it's not less than 100, is it less than 200? If it is, then we'll change the pen color to blue. But again, if it's not less than 200, is it less than 300? In which case, it's going to be yellow. Because we set each of those squares as 100 pixels by 100 pixels, the height of each one is 100, we can go up here in steps of 100 and each time change the pen color accordingly. There we go. Now, once we've done that, we need to end our if statement. Now, we need to be careful here because, of course, we have two if statements. So we have this one here, which you see I've indented slightly more than the original one. So this is the if statement asking all about the Y coordinate, and that will need to be ended. So end if. But we also have this if statement here, and that will also need to be ended. You can't leave an if statement without an end if, like that. Now, of course, the other thing is that we've got these two lines here, and we are going to have to make sure that we still keep a record of this. But where do we put this here? Well, if we have the if statement saying if X is less than 100, that does mean that we are going to be clicking somewhere on the left-hand side, and that may not necessarily be on a coloured palette. As you saw in my example, I only had those at the top left, and there was still some space underneath it. So we will need to keep track of where the mouse is. So this can still be kept right here at the bottom. So we have the if statement asking about the position and changing the color if that position is on a color palette. And then we also keep track of where the mouse is. Now, this does mean that we'll be able to draw over the color palette. It won't make any difference, it'll still work, but it does mean we can draw over it. And there is something we could do to prevent that if we wanted to, but I'm not going to worry too much about it for the purpose of this tutorial. So what I'm going to do now is run this program, and you'll see that the color of the pen is white because I changed that at the top. Let's click on the red palette here. So I'm going to click on that red block, and now as I start drawing, you see the pen has gone red. If I click on the blue there, the pen is now blue. And if I click on the yellow area, I get a yellow pen. So if you've got your color palette with even more colors than I have, and hopefully you do, you could then create all of this code for each of the colors that you've chosen, match them up, and then test that out. So that's the first step in making our painting program more interesting. As I said, you can draw over that color palette, but it won't make any difference to the way that it works. So that doesn't really matter too much. But you know, it's something we could look at maybe if we wanted to improve this further. So what I'm going to do is again give you a pause moment here so that you can work out how to add this code. So remember, you're looking at the subroutine for the mouse being clicked. So the subroutine called mouse clicked. And you're going to have these 2 lines of code still in there from last time. Keep them in there, but before them you want your 2 if statements. Remember, the first one is for the x coordinate, and then the one inside that is for the y coordinate. So I'm going to leave you to have a little go at that. As before, have a go at doing it without looking at my code first of all. If you make mistakes, fine, look at the error messages, see if you can fix at least some of them, or get close to it. And if you need to come back and have a look at my code, then of course that's absolutely fine. And when you've done that in a moment, what we'll then look at is how to increase the thickness of the line, because at the moment, of course, we're just drawing in one single thickness. So let's look at how we can do that in just a moment. Okay, I hope you got on well with that. I hope you're having fun with the drawing program now. It's starting to get more interesting, but at the moment, as I said, we've only got one thickness of line. So we need to work out how we can change that. And the way we're going to do that is to have another kind of palette, but not a color palette. We're going to have one on the right hand side here, which is going to be the line thickness. And the way I want to do this is to mirror this in a way, but instead of having solid blocks of color, I want to have a white outline of a rectangle or a square here, so matching the same size, and then another one underneath that and another one underneath that, with a big circle in the top one, a medium in the middle one, and a small circle in the bottom one, and those will represent the thicknesses of the line. And we can click anywhere in these rectangles in order to be able to change the line thickness. Now, to do that, reasonably straightforward. You might well want to be able to have a go at doing something like that yourself. If you remember the flags and the drawing tutorials we did before, you might well be able to have a go at doing that. There's a slight problem that we'll need to overcome first of all, because if we're going to draw a rectangle on the right hand side, we will need to know what the right hand edge coordinate is. We know obviously with the x coordinate on these palettes here, it's going to be 0. X is 0. But how wide is this graphics window? We don't know. It's not been set. So we need to set a width for the graphics window. And if, say, it was 500 pixels, well, we'd know that the x coordinate of the right hand edge would be 500. So let's set that first of all. So we're going to go right back to the beginning here. We've got the background colors black. This is all the setting up of the graphics window. Here's where we're drawing our graphics palette. Let's put a little comment at the top there so we know what that section is. So draw the color palette. There we go. Always good to put little comments in so you know what your blocks of code are. So this bit above it here is actually drawing or creating the graphics window. So it makes sense here to actually set the size of the graphics window. We can do that fairly easily. If we type graphics window dot and width equals, if we try 500, and I'm going to put the height in there as well. It's less important, but we might as well just play around with this. So the height, if we say 500 as well, let's have a little look at what that looks like. So there we are. So that's 500 by 500. I think we probably want a little bit more on the width. It's up to you how you're going to play that. I'm going to have this as about 1000 by 750. So let's change the width to 1000. Of course, it will look different on different monitors, so you may well have to play around with these numbers and decide what looks good on yours. There we are. I think that's probably about right. So that's 1000 pixels by 750. I'm on a monitor that's HD, so it's 1920 by 1080. So if you have a different resolution on your monitor, it will look different, but just play with those numbers. It doesn't matter. As long as you know, and this is the crucial one, as long as you know what the width is of your graphics window. If you know the width, then we know that the X coordinate of this right hand edge is 1000. So if I want to draw a white rectangle, not a filled one, just a sort of a white outline rectangle, then I will need to start 100 pixels to the left of this right hand edge. So that'll be 900. So the X coordinate would be 900 about here. The Y coordinate, of course, 0. And I want a rectangle that's 100 by 100. So what I'm going to do is draw a rectangle. Now I want it to be white around the outside. I've already got my pen color as white, so that's fine. I can do that. So let's now draw, I'll put a comment in here, draw the thickness palette. So first of all then, I'm going to go to the graphics window, dot, draw rectangle. So remember, fill rectangle is where it's solid, draw is just the outline. And the X coordinate, remember, is 100 pixels to the left of that right hand edge. As mine's 1000, I want to start at 900. The Y coordinate though is going to be 0, it's right at the top. And the size is going to be 100 by 100. So if I was to run that now, there we are. You see I've got a white rectangle on that top right corner, and I'll want to have another 2 underneath that. So I'm going to simply copy and paste that line, and remember here nothing changes. The X coordinate's the same, the size is the same. All that's different is we're moving down. So the Y coordinate will need to be increased each time. As the height of my squares is 100, I'll need to add 100 to the Y coordinate each time I draw a new rectangle. So I'll just have 3 of them like that. If I run that, there we are. I've now got my 3 rectangles. So what we need to do now is to put in the circles into each of these. And these are going to be filled circles, large one at the top, medium and small. Now to do a circle, we need to work out what the coordinates are for the circle. And it's a little bit tricky in Small Basic because it would be really convenient if the coordinates for a circle was its center. We could work out that really easily. Unfortunately in Small Basic, for some reason I've never been able to quite fathom, it's the top left corner of a circle. Yes, you heard that correctly, the corner of the circle. This is why it doesn't make a lot of sense. So to some extent, what I think is easy to do is forget it's a circle and think of it as a square that has a corner, and then we can do the circle fill. You'll kind of hopefully see what I mean by this. So it's going to be a circle, but I'm going to talk about it as though it was a square, since Small Basic needs us to think about the corner of a circle. I'm not bitter by that at all. So first of all then, I'm going to quite a big circle square thing here. So I want the top left corner to be about where the tip of the mouse is, just there. So if you imagine a rectangle going from there down to here, and then we kind of knock the corners off it to create a circle, that's the kind of size I'm looking at. So what I need to do is to work out the coordinates of that top left corner where the mouse point is right putting at now. So we can look at this, obviously, thinking about the size of the rectangle it's in. It's 100 pixels wide. So roughly how far in is that? It's a guess. I'm going to say about, let's say 15. I'm going to guess 15. Doesn't really matter too much. So 15 pixels in. So that means my left coordinate, my X coordinate, is going to be 15 pixels bigger than the left-hand coordinate edge of this square. Let's just do that bit first of all. So I'm going to come down here and of course I'll want to change the brush color for this because it's going to be a solid color. So I'll change that to white. And then let's do our graphics window dot fill ellipse. Ellipse is the circle or square in this case. So we need our coordinates, and the first coordinate then is the x. So our x coordinate we're saying is 15 pixels in from the left-hand edge of this rectangle. This rectangle, the x coordinate is 900. So 15 pixels to the right of that is clearly 915. So let's put that in. The y coordinate, we want this nicely centered, so we'll keep it as 15 pixels down from the top. And the y coordinate here is 0. So 0 plus 15 will give us 15. That's it. I'm sure you had that before I did. Okay. Now, what about the width? Now, this is slightly trickier because, of course, this could potentially be a guess, but let's use some maths here to work it out. If we have the circle 15 pixels in from the left, we'll also want it 15 pixels in from the right. So we have 15 either side, and the rectangle it's in is 100. So we need to take away 15 from the left and 15 from the right of the space that it's in. So 100 minus 15 minus another 15 is of course 70. And as it is a square or circle, it's going to be the same in the height. So we'll put those figures in like that. Let's run this. And there we go. We get a nice circle that is centered in that rectangle and nice and thick. So what we'll do now is the second one. So I'll do the one underneath this. I'm going to copy and paste this line. Now the x coordinate and the y coordinate, sorry, the x on the left and right are going to be slightly different. Because of course this is going to be a smaller circle. In fact, I'm going to get rid of those numbers here. I think that might be a bit more confusing to have those in. So if we were to have, let's just comment out that line for the moment and just picture this. So if this is the top left coordinate of the square that looks much like a circle, where do we want this one here? Probably somewhere further in, maybe around here, something like that perhaps. So how far is that? It's about a quarter, isn't it? Let's say 25. I'm going to keep simple numbers here. 25 I think is right. So 25 pixels in, 25 pixels down. So if we want to have 25 pixels in from the left and the x coordinate is 900, 900 plus 25 is going to be 925. That's our x coordinate. What about our y coordinate? Well, don't forget that this second rectangle doesn't start at the top. It starts 100 pixels down. So it's going to be 100 plus whatever it is, that gap that we want between the top of our circle and the top of the rectangle. So if the top of the rectangle is at 100 and we're saying 25 pixels in from the edge, we want to have 125. So now because our circle, or our rectangle rather, is 100 by 100, we need to say what is 25 from 100 twice. That's going to leave us with 50. That's the width of this circle, and also of course the height. So if we run that now, we can see we get a second circle, slightly smaller than the first one and still centered. Let's do our third one. And for this one, I'm not even going to look at the screen over there. I'm just going to guess some numbers because we've been going up in a fairly steady way. 915, 925, difference of 10. So let's make it another 10. Let's say this is 35. Now, what about the y? We can't just add 35 to this because the third square is 200 pixels down. We're saying 35 pixels in from the edge. So this is going to be 235. Now we need to think about the width and the height. If we're taking 35 in from the edge on both sides, what's 100 minus 35 twice? Well, it's 30. So let's put 30, 30 in there, and that now gives us our 3 line thicknesses. So that's quite a lot of maths, but programming often is maths. That's a lot of what it's all about. It's problem solving, it's language, it's maths, it's so many skills. So that's quite a big thing for you to have a go at doing now, and almost certainly you'll get it wrong at some point, but don't worry. As I said, my advice when drawing circles, because it's small basic and because it doesn't take the center point, is forget it's a circle. Think in your head it's a square and you're thinking of that top left corner, and then just draw an ellipse where the rectangle would be, and hopefully you'll get that. Of course, if you want to have more of these thicknesses, absolutely go for it. No problem at all with that. Have as many as you want. But if you do that, and then what we'll do in a moment is we'll make those interactive in the same way as the color palette on the left is interactive. So I'll give you a few minutes to have a go at that. Again, if you get it wrong, just try again. Don't give up. Don't just cheat and copy my code. There's no benefit whatsoever in just copying my code. So have a go at doing it by yourself. If you get stuck, look at the error messages, try and work out the maths. You'll get a bigger kick out of getting it right if you do it yourself than just copying my code, honestly. But if you do need to cheat and have a look at my code occasionally, here it is. Pause the video, have a look at it. And I'll be right here when you're done with that to add the interactive element to this. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to get your thickness palette on the right hand side. I hope that wasn't too much of a struggle. Certainly not easy, and probably the most complicated part of this entire program, to be honest. But what we need to do now is to add the interactivity to it. We've done this on the left hand side, so with our circle there, sorry, our brush there, we can draw in white. If we click on the red, we draw in red, click on the blue, draw in blue, click on the yellow, draw in yellow, and so forth. So we've got the interactivity going on here. We need to kind of mirror that and have some way of detecting whether the user has clicked on the right-hand edge here. And it's going to be very, very similar. We've got an if statement which asks whether or if the mouse click is less on the x-axis than 100, and if it is the y less than 100, is it less than 200, is it less than 300? So what we can do on the right hand side is simply have another if statement. It says if the user clicks and the x-axis is greater than, now in this case this is greater than 900, I have a width of 1000, this is 100 pixels wide, so if we are clicking and the x-axis for the mouse is more than 900, it means we're in this right hand edge of the screen here, and then inside that we can say, okay, so is the y less than 100 as well, in which case we've clicked in this bit. Is it less than 200? We've clicked in this bit. Is it less than 300? We've clicked in this bit. So we can do a bit of copying and pasting here to save ourselves a little bit of time. So here we have the nested if statements that ask about the x and y coordinates of the mouse. And all I'm going to do to keep things fairly simple here is copy all of that, and I'm going to just push a couple of lines down there and paste a copy of that back in there. So I've got this section here, which I had originally asking about is x less than 100. If it is, then change the color. This bit, we need to say if the mouse x is greater than 900, in which case we're on the right hand side. If it is, then let's have a look at the y coordinate. If the y is less than 100, we've clicked in that top box. Now, of course, we're not changing the pen color. What we're going to be changing here is the pen width. Now, we can change this to different numbers. For the thickest one, I think the thickest number, actually, I'm not sure if it's, let's try 25. I'm not sure if it goes up that far. We'll have a little go at doing that. So each of these is going to be slightly smaller than the one before. So we'll get rid of all the changing colors. Let's have that as 15 and that just as 5. So if we run that now, so there is my normal line. Click on that top box and there is a much thicker line like that. Bit of a weird line that we're getting, but there we go. Click on the middle box and there's that slightly thinner line. Click on the small box and there's the thin line, the same thickness as it was at the beginning. And of course we can do combinations. Let's have the red and a medium line. There we go. Blue and the thick line. There we go. And if you want to, obviously because we're drawing lines and it's on time, if I just show you this, if we move quickly, in fact if we move round in circles there, you're going to get this sort of zigzag effect, which kind of looks cool. I think it looks more like a crayon perhaps. But if you want it to be solid, just move the mouse a little bit slower and you'll get a more solid line like that. So you can draw your sun in the sky like this and go over it, of course, a little bit like that. So let's just draw, there we are, an eye, and there. Now you'll see, of course, how appalling I am at drawing, but there we go. So we've now got a graphics program that allows us to change the color to whatever color we want to use and change the line thickness to whatever we want to use as well. So again, what I'm going to do, this is probably fairly straightforward because it's just copy, paste and change the X coordinate and then the pen width, and you can play around with these numbers. Obviously 25 is fine. I'm not sure actually what it goes up to. Let's just try 100 and see. Yeah, 100 works fine as well. There's some pretty weird effects going on there. So, you know, you can change this to whatever numbers you like. I'm going to put that back to 25 for now, but play around with it. It's your drawing program, so it's up to you how you get it to work. There's going to be one thing left to do, and that is to have the program cleared. So to clear the screen, obviously we could clear the screen by simply closing the window and running the program again. But it'd be quite good to have a clear button or a reset button where we can press and it will clear or reset everything for us. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to have a little look at doing the interactivity for the buttons on the right hand side, and then we'll add our clear or reset button, at which point we're going to be done on this painting app. So I'll give you a moment and I'll be right back here when you're ready. Okay, so now we have a pretty good graphics program. However, at the moment there's no way of clearing the screen. We'd have to close the program and do the program if we wanted to start another picture. So what we're going to do now is, rather than have another button here to click, we're going to have a keyboard press. We're going to have the letter X on our keyboard, so that if we press the letter X on the keyboard, it clears the screen. So to do this, we need to have a way of detecting whether, first of all, the user has pressed a key, and if they have, what key have they pressed. Now this is going to be similar to these two lines of code here that have the graphics window mouse down detected and mouse move detected. We can also detect whether the key on the keyboard has been pressed. So graphics window dot key down. So what happens if they do? Well, we're going to say go and do a subroutine. So like we called these subroutines something that means something to us, mouse clicked, mouse moved, we'll say key pressed. Now it's not giving me that in this list because it's not a small basic code word. It's just simply a name I've come up with for the block of code or subroutine that's going to be run if they press a key. So let's create that subroutine now. So sub key pressed, there we go. And we'll put the end sub in there just so we don't forget. So when we have this subroutine run, the first thing we're going to have to do is find out what key was pressed. So if the graphics window dot last key, and this is something we can use to detect what the last key pressed was. So if it equals the X key, I'll put a capital X in there. So if the X key, and you can have whatever key you want, obviously if you don't like X, choose a different one, but I'm going to use X, and I've put a capital in there, so make sure you use capitals. So if the last key they pressed was the X, then we're going to clear the graphics window. So we can do that very simply with graphics window dot, and surprise, surprise, yep, it's clear. We need to end our if statement like that, and that's it, almost. So let's try this now. Let's run the program. Let's choose a nice yellow, medium color there, and we'll draw a nice big tick there. Let's press the letter X on the keyboard. Now we have cleared the graphics window, fantastic, and I can actually still draw on it, but I haven't got my buttons any longer. So what are we doing about that? Well, what I'm going to do is to take all of the code at the top, and I'm going to just zoom out slightly here because you probably won't be able to see all of this. So let's just there we are. For some reason, I think because I'm recording my screen, it's not zooming out anymore, so I'll have to just manage, I think, at the moment. So what I'm going to do is take all of the code which draws the buttons on the left, the buttons on the right, it draws all of that. I'm going to put all of that into its own subroutine. And then I'm going to get that subroutine to run when the graphics window. So let's get all of this code, and it's basically everything above where we are, the mouse has been clicked. So all of this code here, right to the very top, absolutely everything. I'm going to highlight it all, and I'm going to right click and cut. Be very careful here. I'm then going to go right down to the bottom. I think might be easier here, right down to the bottom, and I'm going to create a subroutine called set up screen. There we are. I'm just naming it setup screen. That's my subroutine, and I'm going to put an end sub at the end there. And inside this subroutine, I'm simply going to paste all of that code I just cut. There we go. Now, if I run the program at this point, I get no errors. I also get that appearing on the left-hand side. Yes, I can draw, but it's kind of like back to where we were. We haven't got those palettes drawn. We're not drawing it. I can actually click where I know the buttons would be, but it's pretty useless. So what needs to happen is this subroutine called setup screen. I'm going to just copy and paste this name here. That needs to happen right at the beginning of the program. Now, because it's a subroutine, we need to just put open and close brackets at the end so that the computer doesn't confuse that with a variable. And if I run the program now, you'll see, because what we haven't done is in this key press subroutine, after we've cleared the graphics window, we need to also then run that up screen subroutine. Don't forget the brackets at the end. So now if I run this program, let's draw in red and thick. Let's draw a little wiggly line there and a yellow wiggly line there. I'm going to press the letter X on my keyboard, and you see that it gets rid of the drawing, but all of this is still there, and I can carry on drawing another picture. Press X to clear it, change the colors, and there we are. So we now have a fairly complete painting app. And you can take these ideas obviously now and extend it to create a much more complex app with more colors, more thicknesses, whatever you like. And you could even perhaps have a palette along the bottom, so a row of blocks along the bottom for the background color. So a row of squares, different colors here, so the person can change the background color of the graphics window. So you can probably work out how to do that one yourself. If you're looking to extend your programming skills, that would be a great project extension task for you. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. Quite a long tutorial, so well done for getting through that. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions at all, please do leave them below and I will try and respond as soon as I can. If you liked the video, it would be fantastic if you could give it a thumbs up. I was considering trying to draw a thumbs up using my graphics window program here, but I don't think I'm going to risk it. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, don't forget to do that and hit the bell so that you know when the next tutorial in this series is going live. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Good luck with your programming, and I'll see you in a future video. Bye for now.